Thousands of people have died in the storm here recently. Thousands, not hundreds. I called a friend up in Pennsylvania and I said, Jack, how many?
For years, Eustace Conway has lived a life that most people only dream of. Wild, free, and far removed from modern chaos. As the rugged star of mountain men, he became a symbol of self-reliance and frontier wisdom, a man who traded city lights for the whisper of the Appalachian woods. But recently, something discovered deep inside his old barn at Turtle Island Preserve has left fans and even local officials stunned. What they found wasn't just unexpected. It was shocking enough to raise serious questions about what's really been happening on Conway's land. Eustace has always been a mystery, a man both admired and misunderstood. To some, he's a modern pioneer preserving the ancient skills of survival. To others, he's an eccentric recluse guarding his own world far from civilization. His 1,000-acre preserve in the Blue Ridge Mountains has long been his sanctuary, a living museum where he teaches visitors how to build shelters, hunt, and live in harmony with nature. But behind the peaceful image of campfires and hand-carved cabins, whispers of something hidden on the property began, circulating. When authorities and volunteers entered, one of the older barns, a structure Conway himself built decades ago using traditional tools, they weren't prepared for what they'd uncover. Dust-covered tools, stacks of preserved supplies, and signs of years of quiet labor painted a picture of a man devoted to simplicity. Yet among the ordinary artifacts of mountain living lay something far more unusual, an astonishing discovery that no one expected to find in Eustace Conway's world. As word of the barn's contents spread, so did speculation. Was it part of a secret project? Evidence of an experiment gone too far? Or simply another example of Conway's unconventional genius? Whatever the truth, what they found inside, that barn would reveal more about Eustace Conway's life and his secrets than anyone ever imagined. Deep in the heart of North Carolina's Blue Ridge Mountains lies Turtle Island Preserve, a 1,000-acre stretch of rugged wilderness that feels frozen in time. This land is home to one of America's most fascinating figures, Eustace Conway. To many, he's the embodiment of freedom, a man who turned his back on modern conveniences to live completely off the grid. To others, he's a mystery wrapped in legend, a modern mountain man guarding secrets the world may never fully know. For over 3 decades, Eustace has lived here without electricity, plumbing, or technology, surviving on what nature provides. His life became known to millions through the hit series Mountain Men, where he was seen chopping wood, hunting deer, tanning hides, and teaching visitors the forgotten skills of survival. Every inch of his land tells a story. The handmade log cabins, the tools crafted by his own hands, and the barns that stand like monuments to a simpler time. But it was one of those barns that would soon draw the world's attention for all the wrong reasons. Locals had always admired Eustace's craftsmanship. His barns weren't just storage buildings. They were works of art, built without power tools, and assembled with traditional joinery techniques used for centuries. Yet one particular barn, the oldest on the property, had been sealed off for years. Even longtime visitors to Turtle Island said they rarely saw Eustace near it. When asked about it, he'd simply smile and say, "That one's for special work." No one pushed further, until recently. In the spring of 2024, a team of volunteers helping with repairs on the preserve noticed strange sounds coming from the structure, faint mechanical noises echoing from inside. Curious, they asked Conway for permission to investigate. At first, he hesitated. He was fiercely private and his land was sacred to him. But eventually, he agreed, warning them to be careful with what you move. Some things have stories you don't want to disturb. When they finally unlatched the heavy wooden doors, a wave of cold, dusty air poured out. Inside, the barn was dimly lit by thin shafts of sunlight slicing through the cracks in the walls. What they found at first seemed ordinary: old tools, stacked lumber, hand-carved furniture, and supplies from years of teaching survival workshops. But as they moved deeper, they stumbled upon something unexpected, a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. The space looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Inside the compartment were dozens of sealed crates, their wood darkened with age. Some bore hand-carved markings, unfamiliar symbols that didn't match any known language. The group carefully pried one open, expecting old farming tools or relics. Instead, they found a collection of preserved materials, meticulously wrapped journals, strange metal devices, and weathered artifacts that seemed completely out of place in a wilderness cabin. Eustace, who had been standing quietly at the entrance, walked forward when he saw what they'd uncovered. Witnesses said his face grew pale and he whispered, "I hoped you'd never find that." When pressed for an explanation, he gave none, only a vague statement. Some things are better understood with time. That barn holds part of my life that doesn't belong to the show or the cameras or the stories people tell. From that day forward, rumors spread quickly across the nearby towns. Some claimed the barn held historical treasures. Others whispered about a long-forgotten experiment or ancient Appalachian relics Conway had been studying. Whatever it was, it reignited public curiosity about the man who had always seemed to live between myth and reality. Reporters tried to reach him, but Eustace refused to comment. "The land speaks for itself," he said cryptically during one brief phone interview. "What's in that barn is part of that story." No one knew exactly what he meant. But one thing was clear. Whatever they had discovered wasn't just another collection of wilderness tools. It was something that tied deeply into Conway's mysterious past, perhaps even explaining why he'd spent his life hidden away in the mountains. When word spread about the strange discovery in Eustace Conway's barn, curiosity swept through the small North Carolina town of Boone like wildfire. Locals who'd known Eustace for years couldn't believe it. The man who preached simplicity and nature's wisdom might have been hiding something all along. For a man who'd built his life around transparency, teaching, and living, as our ancestors did, this revelation felt completely out of character. What could possibly be inside that hidden space that Eustace didn't want anyone to see? At first, Eustace refused to let anyone back into the barn. He told the volunteers to leave things as they were and sealed the doors again. Days later, however, a close friend, someone who had lived and worked beside him for years, convinced him to share what was inside. As Eustace slowly opened the old wooden doors again, dust swirled in the light, and the truth of what he'd been protecting for so long began to unfold. Inside those mysterious crates were handwritten journals, hundreds of pages, some so brittle they nearly crumbled when touched. Each one was filled with Eustace's thoughts, sketches, and maps dating back to the early 1980s. But they weren't just about living off the land. They detailed something far more personal, an experiment that he'd been quietly conducting for most of his life, a complete reconstruction of the lost skills, tools, and mindset of early American pioneers. He wasn't just living off the grid, and he was documenting every piece of knowledge that modern society had forgotten. Every page revealed a system, a philosophy, about self-sustainability that was meant to be passed on after his death. "This is not about nostalgia," one entry read. "It's about survival. When the world forgets how to live, this knowledge will be its only hope." The journals also contained letters exchanged with scholars, craftsmen, and indigenous elders across the country. He had spent decades gathering wisdom from those who still lived close to nature, combining it into what he called the human blueprint, a guide to rebuilding civilization from scratch using nothing but the natural world. It was his life's secret project, hidden away from media and modern influence. But the journals weren't the only thing in the barn. Inside one of the larger crates was an object that caught everyone's attention, a complex metal structure, roughly the size of a small desk, made of copper, steel, and wood. It looked both ancient and modern, a device with gears and levers that no one could quite identify. When asked what it was, Eustace smiled faintly and said, "It's an energy model, one that runs without oil, gas, or electricity. My great-grandfather started it. I just finished it." He explained that it was a prototype for a natural energy converter, a system designed to draw power from environmental forces like air pressure, temperature change, and motion. He believed it could power basic tools without harming the environment. But the design had never been revealed publicly because, as he put it, the world isn't ready to live simply. They'd rather live comfortably. For years, Eustace had been working on perfecting it, using knowledge passed down from his ancestors and refined through trial and error. It was the physical representation of everything he stood for. Independence from modern excess, powered entirely by nature itself. However, his secrecy wasn't just about protecting an invention. Among the journals was a final note addressed to those who find this. It read, "You've uncovered more than wood and metal. You've found a reminder that we were never meant to conquer the earth, only to understand it. Everything I've built here isn't for fame or fortune. It's for the time when we must remember how to begin again." The volunteers were stunned. What they had expected to find, old tools, forgotten. Still, one question remained unanswered. Why had Eustace kept it hidden for so long? Why keep something so revolutionary locked away in silence? As the story would soon reveal, the answer was tied not to ambition, but to heartbreak and to a chapter of his life that Eustace Conway had never spoken about, publicly. Long before Eustace Conway became known as the last American man, before television cameras followed him, through the forests of the Blue Ridge Mountains, he was a quiet, curious boy from Columbia, South Carolina, a child who never seemed to belong in the modern world. From an early age, Eustace preferred the woods to the classroom. While other children played video games, he built shelters from fallen branches, tanned animal hides, and dreamed of living the way the early pioneers once did. But hidden beneath his fascination with nature was a story of pain, loss, and an unresolved past that shaped everything he would become. His father, Dr. Eustace Conway Sr., was a strict and brilliant man, a World War II veteran who believed deeply in discipline and intellect. He wanted his son to follow in his footsteps, to pursue a respectable career, perhaps in medicine or academia. But young Eustace had other ideas. He wanted to live freely, to test himself against nature, to find truth outside the boundaries of modern life. This difference tore them apart. Their relationship grew cold and distant, marked by years of harsh arguments and silence. In interviews years later, Eustace admitted that his father's disapproval haunted him. "He thought I was wasting my life," Eustace once said. "But I just couldn't live in a world that didn't feel real." That longing to prove himself, to build something that would outlast him, was the seed that grew into Turtle Island Preserve. Yet few knew that behind that public dream lay a much deeper motivation: redemption. According to letters found among the journals in the barn, Eustace had once set out to prove to his father that the old ways still mattered. One letter, dated 1981, read, "Father, you believe I've turned my back on reason, but I see reason in the forest. I see truth in the way the wind carves the earth. I will build a place that reminds men of what they've lost. One day, maybe you'll understand, that letter was never sent." His father passed away before the two could reconcile. From that moment, Eustace made a vow. He would dedicate the rest of his life to completing the dream he'd promised his father. Even if the world misunderstood him, the secret project in the barn, the journals, the strange device, the maps, was part of that promise. It wasn't just a record of survival. It was a message to future generations, a continuation of a legacy his father could never see. He had hidden it not out of greed, but because it was too personal, too raw, too sacred to expose to the noise of fame. There were other clues in the journals, too: sketches of his family's ancestral land, diagrams of tools inspired by 19th century designs, and several cryptic entries about a collapse of balance. Scholars who later reviewed copies of these writings suggested that Eustace might have been predicting environmental or societal breakdowns long before such ideas became mainstream. His writings hinted at a quiet fear that humanity was on the brink of forgetting how to live with the earth, not against it. Yet despite his visionary ideas, Eustace carried an unshakable loneliness. Friends described him as kind but distant, a man who could connect deeply with nature but struggled to connect with people. He once said, "The forest never judges me, never argues, never asks me to be anyone else." That solitude, however, came at a cost. Years of living off-grid, fighting legal battles to keep Turtle Island open, and being portrayed as a rugged outsider on Mountain Men took a toll on his spirit. What the show never revealed was how deeply Eustace wrestled with the burden of his calling. In one of the final journals found in the barn, he wrote, "I've built a world apart, but it's hard to live between two worlds. One dying of convenience, the other starving for meaning. I stand in the middle, and sometimes it feels like both are fading." When this writing surfaced, fans began to see Eustace in a new light, not just as a survivalist or reality star, but as a man carrying the weight of generations. His struggle wasn't only against modern society, but against the ghost of his father, the pull of isolation, and the fear that all his work might vanish when he was gone. The hidden past inside that barn revealed the true heart of Eustace Conway, a man trying to bridge the old world and the new, holding on to the values his father couldn't see, and perhaps finally finding peace in the place where his two worlds collided. After the discovery in his barn became public, Eustace Conway's quiet mountain world changed forever. Turtle Island Preserve, once known as a peaceful retreat for survivalists and nature lovers, suddenly found itself at the center of intense media attention. Journalists, documentarians, and curious travelers all wanted to see the mystery barn that had reignited the legend of America's most famous modern frontiersman. But for Eustace, the discovery wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about closure. He rarely grants interviews, but in one quiet conversation recorded later, he said, "That barn held my life's lessons, not my secrets. People look for mystery when the truth is simple. I wanted to build something that mattered." For him, the crates of journals and the strange machine weren't hidden to deceive anyone. They were a part of a lifelong mission that the world wasn't ready to understand. Eustace had always feared that people would reduce his philosophy to entertainment. His appearances on Mountain Men brought him recognition, but also misunderstanding. While audiences admired his toughness, few grasped the spiritual depth of his journey. "The show made me look like a man fighting nature," he once said. "But the truth is, I live because of it." The barn discovery, in a way, corrected that narrative. It revealed that Eustace wasn't just surviving in the wilderness. He was documenting how to live. After the news broke, scientists and sustainability experts began to take an interest in his writings. Environmental researchers found his observations on land balance, soil cycles, and natural energy fascinatingly precise. Some even described his work as an untapped manual for ecological harmony. Universities and green tech startups reached out, hoping to study the journals more closely. But Eustace politely declined most requests. "If you want to understand what's written in those pages," he said, "you have to walk these woods. The answers aren't in the ink, they're in the dirt." Still, not all reactions were positive. Skeptics accused him of fabricating the story for publicity. Others doubted the authenticity of the mysterious device, calling it a primitive sculpture rather than a genuine invention. But those who knew Eustace personally stood by him. They described long nights working beside him in candlelight, testing small mechanisms and refining designs built from natural principles. Whether or not his invention could truly generate sustainable energy didn't matter. What mattered was the idea. That innovation could coexist with simplicity. The discovery also reignited the debate over his land battles with local authorities. Years earlier, Eustace had faced legal trouble when building inspectors claimed that his structures didn't meet modern codes. The incident nearly shut down Turtle Island Preserve. But now, with renewed attention, supporters rallied behind him, calling for the government to respect traditional craftsmanship and sustainable living. Petitions poured in online, demanding that Eustace's property be recognized as a national heritage site for natural education. Despite the storm of attention, Eustace remained remarkably calm. He spent his days teaching students how to build shelters, track animals, and read the weather through signs in the sky, the same things he's done for decades. Visitors say that if you meet him in person, he'll greet you with a warm handshake, offer a tour of the land, and maybe tell a story by the campfire. But when asked about the barn, he only smiles and says, "That's just part of the journey." Those closest to him believe that opening the barn and confronting the memories it held brought him a kind of peace. After years of living with the ghost of his father's disapproval, he finally accepted that his life's purpose wasn't to prove anything. It was to preserve something. He used to carry that weight, one friend shared. But now, when he looks at Turtle Island, he sees not what he lost, but what he built. Today, Eustace Conway continues to live exactly as he always has, humbly, quietly, and in harmony with the land. Technology may have advanced, but he still cooks over fire, rides horses instead of cars, and sleeps under the stars. For him, every sunrise is another chance to live the truth he's always believed, that life's greatest power lies not in what we own, but in how deeply we connect to the earth that sustains us. And as for that barn, it still stands, weathered but strong, its doors closed once again. But those who've seen what's inside say it's more than just a collection of old journals and tools. It's a monument to a man who dedicated his life to reminding the world of something we've almost forgotten, that real wealth is measured not in money, but in meaning. Eustace Conway's story isn't finished. The man who once hid his greatest work now stands as proof that even in a world racing toward the future, wisdom from the past still holds the power to guide us home.